Then we'll call this meeting of the Oversight Board for the date of September 25th, 2013 to order. And may I have the roll call, please?
Board members Abkarian. Here. Barry.
Here.
Nakasone. Here. Ochoa. Sheehan.
Here.
Steger.
Here.
And Chair Raggio.
Here. And may I have a report?
The posting of the agenda for the September 25th, 2013 special meeting of the Glendale Oversight Board was posted on Friday, September 20, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
And the second item?
At 2A is minutes, approval of minutes for the regular Oversight Board meeting of Wednesday, August 7th, 2013.
Do I hear?
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Board members Abkarian.
Yes.
Barry.
Yes.
Nakasone.
Yes.
Ochoa. Sheehan.
Yes.
Steger.
Yes.
And Chair Raggio.
Yes. Any informational items that we should be made aware of? Then we'll go on to action items.
Okay, at 4A, pardon me, Director of Economic Development regarding revision to Oversight Board Resolution number OSB-24 to clarify the transfer of housing assets to the Housing Authority to include only the Department of Finance approved assets and exclude the encumbered amounts of the Low and Moderate Income Housing Fund. At 4A1 is resolution authorizing revision of resolution number OSB-24.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. This item before you is to correct a previous resolution by the Oversight Board. The Department of Finance reviewed the previous resolution and rejected it. Upon conferring with them, they misunderstood the resolution, and what they thought was we were taking items that they had disallowed to be transferred to the Housing Authority, and they interpreted the resolution as this was our attempt, after that process was done, to transfer the disallowed assets to the Housing Authority. We explained to them that the only purpose for bringing this resolution to the Oversight Board was due to some concerns we had heard amongst other agencies that once the state controller pays a visit to the agency, they want an Oversight Board resolution acknowledging the transfer from the agency to the Housing Authority. That's not called for in the Act, so it was just the belts and suspenders. And so once we explained that to DOF, they understood. They asked us to clarify that it excludes the disallowed housing assets, and that once we sent it back up to them, they would be fine with it. So this is just to clarify the previous resolution.
Nothing new, just a way of doing it. All right. Thank you. Any questions? Discussion? May I hear a motion to accept it?
Motion to approve.
A second.
Roll call, please.
Board members Abkarian.
Yes.
Barry.
Yes.
Nakasone.
Yes.
Ochoa. Sheehan.
Yes.
Steger.
Yes.
And Chair Raggio.
Yes. Next item, please.
At 4B is Director of Economic Development regarding recognized obligation payment schedule for January to June 2014, ROPS 13-14B. At 4B1 is resolution adopting ROPS 13-14B for January 1st through June, 30th, 2014, including administrative budget.
Okay. What we have in front of you is the next ROPS schedule. As by this point, you're all familiar with the ROPS. This ROPS covers the period of January 1st through June 30th of 2014. And with this ROPS, the Department of Finance issued a new digital application for the agencies to submit the ROPS. So what we did was we prepared it. We printed it, we went over it, we went through the new validation period, which is what the DOF recommends. They want you to put together your ROPS request, have it filtered through their validation to make sure that the ROPS as presented to the Oversight Board is the same ROPS that's sent to DOF, barring any changes that you give us during this meeting. And so it has gone through the validation process, which means every field was filled out, and it is ready to be submitted. What I did receive from a couple of board members is a memo that was prepared by Los Angeles County Consultants, and it was distributed to the board September 24th. The county consultants have gone through our ROPS and have come up with some questions. I'm prepared to go through each of those questions in response, but I'd like to ask the board if you have any questions on the ROPS before I jump to this memo.
Questions?
Okay. We are running copies. They should be coming here shortly. There they are. So I'll have Ani distribute copies of the county memo for those of you that don't have them. Okay, so the first item is the total outstanding debt and obligation. The county memo refers to an increase between the last ROPS and this ROPS, and after I went back to review, during ROPS 1314A, there were a number of line items where we had listed unable to determine the total outstanding debt or obligation, and the reason behind that is for items like debt service, it's very easy to determine what's outstanding. You just take the payment schedule and include the balance. For construction-related projects, for consultant contracts, it's a little bit more difficult to estimate how long the agency is going to be around, how long we're going to use the consultant. And with construction projects, as you all know, things come up, and so it is a little bit more difficult to come up with a definitive number for the total debt outstanding. So the increase is because we didn't have that filled out for all of the items for ROPS 1314A. The next item is towards the bottom of page 1. They asked for a little bit more information on the Alex Theater lease and Alex Theater management agreement. In terms of the Alex Theater management agreement, our obligation to Glendale Arts, the operator of the theater, is a $415,000 fee come due every July, which is why you will not see it in today's ROPS, because it comes due every July. We have 2 more payments remaining as the management agreement ends in 2015, so that's an $830,000 obligation, and that will not change. It's a very defined amount in the management agreement. In terms of the lease also expires at the same time as the management agreement. However, with the lease, because it required the agency to make a number of capital improvements to the theater, and the list was prepared back in 2007, there were dollar amounts attached to each of the capital improvement projects based on 2007 estimates and information. And so the agency's direction to staff was to bring each item back to the agency prior to implementation. And what we found was that as we would bid out each of the projects or define the project beyond just the one line item on the schedule, some of the costs increased. And so the ROPS process further complicated that, because you have to prepare your ROPS in advance sometimes before you even bid things out. And so what I can tell you is by the time the next ROPS rolls around, which will be ROPS 1415A, we should be done with all of our capital improvement projects for the Alex Theater. And so the only request related to the Alex Theater lease agreement would be any staff time that would be to finish up the projects, close things out, and so we should not.
You mean physically finish?
Correct.
All right.
Correct. Any construction management, closing out the contracts, that type of work. And so this ROPS includes the remaining obligations on the capital improvement projects that we have not yet started. So that's for the Alex Theater management agreement. In terms of the MONA agreement, sort of along the same lines as the Alex Theater lease agreement, we prepared the ROPS before we had more refined numbers. And so at this point, the request on this ROPS, which I think is $875,000, should get us through the end of the construction for the MONA obligation, barring any surprises during construction. And so by the time the next ROPS rolls around, we should be done with this contract. We will have some minimal staff costs just to close out the project.
Yes.
Let's say if we go with Mona's construction and find out all of a sudden that the whole building has asbestos or something very major that needs an additional $1 million, where would that $1 million come from?
If we found that out, we would place that on the next ROPS and bring it to you and explain why we didn't know about it in advance, and that would be our only way to fund it. We would have to bring it back to you.
Okay, how about the reserves? How does the reserves
What we-
work? Let's say 13 and 14A reserves.
The request that's on this ROPS looks at what we plan on spending during 1314A, and it's the difference. And so we've accounted for what should be paid out during 1314A. So we project out what will be remaining and then put the balance on the next ROPS.
You had a question also?
Yeah, I have a question. Doesn't the MONA budget have a contingency for things like?
Yeah, Mr. Abkarian, Mr. Berry's correct. The MONA project did include a 20% contingency. So that would go.
By the end of 1314B, how much have we given or spent on Mona specifically? By the end of 13-14B?
Somewhere around the range of $3 million.
Is that a question that can be looked into and then?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to know
The
how much we
ballpark-
spend and how
ballpark-
much more is left to give to them and what other contingencies they have, specifically on Mona.
Yeah, ballpark, I'd say $3 million, but we could give you a detailed breakdown. We could send
And
it
how
out.
much is left for them to finish the project?
It'll be done with this ROPS.
So there won't be anything else left? Okay.
Let the record show that Board Member Ochoa entered at 2:43.
She thinks.
Going on 244, though.
I can continue unless there are additional questions on Mona.
Are there? Board members have any questions relating to this?
The next item in the county memo is on the top of page 2. It deals with the agency's admin allowance. Staff has estimated staffing costs and maintenance and operations costs and included it with admin. We do realize that our request is above the 3% that is allowed to us. However, if once the ROPS is approved and we have a set amount of admin allowance, we will have to reduce our maintenance and operations costs to bring it down. To the extent we can do that, if there are additional costs that can't be brought down, then we will bring an item to you to see if we have other funding sources available to the agency to fund our administrative costs above the allowed amount. At this time, without knowing what the final RPTTF approved amount will be from DOF, the best we could do is just estimate the administrative allowance. On the next item is, it says DOF reclassification of ROPS 1314A item, and this is specific to your legal counsel's contract. The county's statement is, the Oversight Board may wish to ask the Successor Agency to clarify why it is payable out of the reserve balance and the availability of the reserve balance to meet the obligation. What I'd like to point out too is the DOF sent out instructions with this new ROPS template, and I'm going to read directly from their instructions on the reserve balance funding source. Carryover of a preceding ROPS period RPTTF for use in the subsequent ROPS period if the authorized amount was not fully spent, and in this case what we estimated to be spent on legal counsel was not fully expended, and the remaining authorized amount is expected to be paid in the subsequent ROPS, the use of a preceding period's RPTTF should be listed under reserve balance. And so DOF is telling us, you estimated $12,000, you only spent $3,000, you're still going to have legal counsel for the Oversight Board during this next ROPS period, so go ahead and use that $9,000 and list it under reserve balance rather than ask for new money. So we are following the DOF's instructions in moving that to the reserve balance column. Are there any questions on that item?
Questions?
The rest of the memo refers back to the Alex Theater lease, which I've already touched on.
You,
Go ahead.
just a question. The termination of the lease that they're mentioning, that you can terminate a lease within 180 days at any time. And the DOF didn't require it, but made a recommendation that maybe that's a suggestion that that's something that we can do. First of all, why we would, what if we do that recommendation, what saving is there to the city? And if we do that, what consequences are there to the Alex Theater?
I'll let Jillian answer the legal part of it, but we did ask DOF about this. We said, this is in your letter, so what do you mean by it? And they said, this is something that's up to your oversight board. If your oversight board asked you to do that, then we would defer to them. We did bring the Alex Theater along with the Mona agreement and the Lemley agreement to you sometime last year to ask you this specific question: do you want us to terminate? And the direction was not to terminate given the outstanding obligations.
That was different. I think that had to do with the Mona contract, that if we terminate, there was actual damages. The Alex Theater, my understanding is that at any time we can actually terminate the agreement with a 180-day notice. That's what my understanding was of the agreement. Not have seen the agreement, just reading about the agreement, I wouldn't be able to tell you. That's why I want to take a look at that and see if that is actually true. If it's true that without any obligation, the Alex Theater lease agreement could be canceled, that's something that I wanted to kind of see first of all. But if that's not true, then there's always legal obligations, of course, then that's not a consideration. So I first wanted to get an answer. Is that true that we can cancel the lease with a 180-day notice?
If I can just direct you to the Oversight Board resolution that I was referring to, did include the Alex Theater agreement that you looked at. You further requested review of Mona, which is why it came back to you. But just for clarification, that was Oversight Board Resolution 12, and it included the direction not to terminate the agreement, including the Alex Theater lease agreement. But I'll let Jillian answer the legal questions in terms of what it means for Glendale Arts if we
Ms.
were to
Van
terminate.
Gelder, you had a comment on that, didn't you?
Yes, members of the board, I just wanted to add to what Ms. Babolian was saying. With the resolution was heard by the Oversight Board on August 22nd, 2012. That's when a number of contracts were brought forward under the Dissolution Act for consideration by the Oversight Board, whether or not it would be in the interests of the taxing entities, weighing the costs and the benefits to either terminate or modify those existing agreements. And the Alex Theater agreement as well as the Mona agreement were part of that, as Ms. Babolian referenced. It does not say that the matters cannot be brought back for reconsideration in front of the Oversight Board. If the Oversight Board wishes to reconsider one of those contracts it's looked at previously, again, the analysis would be pursuant to the Dissolution Act whether or not it would be of more net benefit to the taxing entities to terminate that agreement as opposed to keep the agreement in place or modify it in some way. And that is a determination that is within the Oversight Board's purview. as indicated by the county consultants, they're correct in noting that it's not the Department of Finance's determination, it's the Oversight Board's determination with respect to the interests of the taxing entities. So that's the legal framework, and counsel for Oversight Board certainly should weigh in on it as well.
Everything she said is pretty much correct. There's a Health and Safety Code section that addresses the termination issue, which we sort of dealt with in Mona, and that's essentially, you guys have the right to make that determination, and the standard is, as she said, you look to whether it will reduce liabilities and increase the net revenues to the taxing entities, and essentially if it's in the best interest of the taxing entities. So.
And one last comment, Mr. Abkarian, to answer your question about what it means in terms of revenues back to the city. As we are anticipating finishing up all of our outstanding obligations on this ROPS, we would not request additional funding other than just the miscellaneous staffing costs on the next ROP. So the amount of residual to come back to you as the taxing entities representatives will be the same.
Further questions?
You acknowledge that the admin allowance is higher than 3%, and we're going to wait till whatever Department of Finance approves to adjust the amount. Do you think it's going to go up, though, that's going to justify the higher admin allowance?
No, if anything, the RPTTF will not go higher than what we've requested, and so
we shouldn't be planning how to fund that additional excess?
to the extent we can use remaining reserve balances, and we do have some reserve balances from ROPS 1314A, that would be our first choice in terms of funding sources. But that's not clear from this new ROPS process if we can do that or not. And so in submitting this, that's one of our outstanding questions for DOF. And we do anticipate we'll have a back and forth with DOF.
And if I might add, to the extent that there is some opportunity for examining the characterization of the line item in cases where the services that are used for project management and oversight, as opposed for traditionally exclusively administrative needs, there's a possibility that some of those services can be funded with ROPS and not subject to the RPTTF cap. So that's something that we're always examining with the DOF on a going forward basis.
Further questions? We can go on then.
My concluding comment on the ROPS is that from the first ROPS that was presented to you, we have retired a number of items and paid them off. And so in keeping with the goals of dissolution, we have retired obligations, and we plan on retiring more by the time the next ROPS rolls around.
Thank you. Does that end the explanation associated with the resolution?
Yes, unless the board members have any questions
Are there
that
questions?
I didn't address.
If none, I'll entertain a motion for adoption.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, who moved and who seconded? Okay. Board members Abkarian,
Yes.
Berry, Nakasone,
Yes.
Ochoa,
Yes.
Sheehan,
Yes.
Steger,
Yes.
Chair Raggio.
Yes. Next item, please.
5 is oral communications. There were no cards submitted.
I take it no one in the audience wants to make a statement? Seeing none, next item.
At item 6 is board member staff comments.
I have one item that I'd like to bring to the attention of the board members, and I brought a copy of it. It's the editorial in Sunday's Times that relates to a proposal made but not voted on with respect to a continuation of a redevelopment kind of agency. And this is made by the chair of the majority of the Senate. And I brought it for the purpose of, if you haven't read it, then make copies for the board members, because it's kind of interesting, because it reveals some of the thinking that's taking place up there at the present time. as the Times does, and they usually do, they chastise the redevelopment agency for being wasteful and everything that goes along with lousy business practices. They didn't accept Glendale at that time in there. But the end result is that they found that the result is that you need something in this state to replace it. And the senior member, Steinberg, has seen fit to make a proposal, although he didn't go all the way with it. And I would assume this is going to come up sometime in the near future with respect to that. So there may be another agency that's being created with respect to the replacement or redevelopment. The end part of it is that it implies that it'll be fairer to all the participants, including the state. So the end result is that it looks like it's one more way to get state money out of the cities. But I think I'm going to leave it with you, and I think it's worthwhile for making copies and distributing them among the board members and whomever else wants to read it. Sunday's Times, this last issue. That's my comment. Anybody else?
I just have one comment. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the county actually forwarding the ROPS in a positive note, if I can say that. I felt that this review was more positive. It provided more focus to the board, where the board could actually focus on items. We agree or disagree, that's a different story, but it was more of a positive spin to it instead of saying, hey, tell them to give us money or to do something else. So I want to thank the county for providing us with that review.
Thank you for the comment. I just wish they would come sooner instead of last minute on that. Any further comments?
Staff comment, next week is your regularly scheduled meeting, and we will have one agenda item, which is to address the long-range property management plan. This is one of the last hurdles through this dissolution process. This addresses all of the agency's real property assets. Up to this point, you've been dealing with the cash, and now the focus is on the real property assets. We will be sending out the agenda report and the attachments tomorrow via email. I did bring hard copies to you for you today, so we will be handing those out to you.
Can I ask a quick question, staff?
Yeah.
After the long-range property management plan is adopted, how much longer would we anticipate continuing to have an oversight board? At what point are we done?
Well, for certain, every 6 months until our ROPS obligations are paid off, and we know of at least a couple of obligations in Glendale that stretch out beyond 2030. However, this board will definitely sunset prior to August 2015, because in the law there will be one oversight board per county after that date.
And we have a 4-year obligation, don't we?
It's not quite 4 years, because you came on board in May 2012, so you'll sunset August 2015, so, yeah.
And you said something about 2030 that...
We have obligations with the Walt Disney Company that go through.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm eating plenty of spinach. Well, I'll try. Let's say it that way. Do we have anything else on the agenda?
Just adjournment.
I'll entertain a motion. Second. We are adjourned. And thank you all for coming.